Alright. Look, guys. Look, they're rioting across all of Cuba. Food shortages. The socialism has caught up with Cuba. That's definitely what's happened. Not, definitely nothing else. Don't look too deep into the story, okay?
El pueblo salió a expresarse libremente y están reprimiendo y están dando golpes y eso es inadmisible. Nosotros estamos aquí y no permitimos que den golpes. No somos nadie, pero estamos aquí para apoyar y que no den golpes.
Si tú quieres que el pueblo cubano esté mejor, levanta el bloqueo primero y vamos a ver cómo tocamos. No me estés diciendo que es el gobierno ineficiente, el gobierno brutal o dictadura. ¿Cuál es la dictadura que hay en Cuba? La dictadura que es para que todo el mundo esté un poco mejor. La dictadura que hacemos para todos. Esa es la dictadura.
Interesting at the end there. Worst economic recession so far. Worst economic crisis in 30 years.
Aquí nosotros estamos hoy defendiendo lo que hicimos hace 60 años y que esto es nuestro y que esto costó mucha vida y que más nunca volverá aquí el capitalismo y que estos mercenarios pagados por el imperio más nunca van a coger las calles nuestras. Primero tienen que matarnos a todos.
Well, they seem to be pretty in favor of the socialism. And yet, let's see what the Miami Herald, a noted supporter of Cuba, has to say. Freedom! Thousands of Cubans take to the streets to demand the end of dictatorship. In an unprecedented display of anger and frustration, thousands of people took to the streets Sunday in cities and towns across Cuba, including Havana, to call for the end of the decades-old dictatorship and demand food and vaccines, as shortages of basic necessities have reached crisis proportions and COVID-19 cases have soared. From the Malecon, Havana's famous seawall near the old city, to small towns in Artemisilla province and Palma Soriano, the second largest city in Santiago de Cuba province. Videos live streamed on Facebook showed thousands of people walking and riding bikes and motorcycles along streets while chanting "Freedom, down with communism," and "Patria y vida," Homeland in Life, which has become a battle cry among activists after a viral music video turned the revolutionary slogan "Homeland or Death" on its head. "We are not afraid," chanted Samantha Regalado, maybe later, while she recorded hundreds of people walking along a narrow street in Palma Soriano. During the day, protests erupted in several cities, including the island's biggest, Havana, Santiago, Santa Clara, Matazanas, Matanzas, Cienfuegos, Arguin, but also smaller towns like Palma Soriano, Cardenas, Colon, Tierra de Malena, Artemisia, and others. At least 25 protests in different locations on the island. Jack sounded Italian. I know, I was doing an Italian accent. Last time Cubans took to the streets to protest against the communist government in 1994, and Fidel Castro was alive. But the uprising, known as the Maleconazo, only took place in Havana and didn't last long, as the former Cuban leader quickly turned the demonstrations into a massive exodus after he opened Cuba's maritime borders. Thousands of Cubans left the island in makeshift boats and rickety rafts in what became known as the Balsero Crisis. Videos streamed on Facebook by Antonio Miguel Cobas Jalowiski around 1 p.m. in Palma Soriana showed hundreds of protesters calling for freedom and chanting, "Down with the dictatorship, down with Diaz-Canel," a reference to Cuban leader Miguel Diaz-Canel. The protesters also demanded medicine, COVID vaccines, the end of hunger. Crowd is seen pushing a police car and shouting, "The dictator just arrived," in reference to the police. One protester is heard saying, "This is a peaceful demonstration." Let's see. In an impromptu televised address later that afternoon, Diaz-Canel blamed the protests on U.S. efforts to tighten the embargo with the alleged intention of provoking a social uprising that would justify a military intervention. Visibly upset and raising his voice, the Cuban leader warned that protesters would face a strong response and called all revolutionaries to confront them on the streets with firmness and courage. Ooh, this could get nasty. We're not going to hand over the sovereignty and independence of our people. Many revolutionaries in this country who are willing to give our lives. We are willing to do anything, and we will be in the streets fighting. Cuba is in the throes of its worst economic contraction in over 3 decades, as chronic inefficiencies and paralyzing bureaucracy have gradually eroded the country's production capacity, including the essential food and agriculture sectors. Trump-era sanctions have reduced access to vital economic lifelines like remittances, and foreign investment has plunged. Painful currency reforms this year have sent inflation soaring, and long lines for food have again become commonplace. I wonder, by the way, why would they now? Let's ask ourselves, why would Cuba be in one of the worst economic situations of the modern era of the past 30 years? What could cause such a thing to happen? Could it be that I wonder. Let's take a look. Cuba. Tourism. In 2020. The number one article, there is no one. Cuba is suffering from tourism standstill. I wonder, tourism as a percentage of GDP, Cuba. In 2019, tourism in Cuba accounted for over 10% of its economy. I wonder what losing 10% of your economy does to you. I wonder what losing 10% of your economy does to you, plus the reintroduction of sanctions. I wonder what those two things together do to a country. It fucks you, that's what. True! Exactly! Like, that's... that's the thing. Yeah, it turns out people get really hungry and lack crucial medicine when your country is under a blanket embargo by the United States of America, its closest, largest trading partner. And, on top of that, when all of its tourism stops because of a global pandemic. I wonder why people are angry. Guys, it's not the socialism. I will say it probably does have something to do with the lack of, like, democratic representation in Cuba. As far as I understand, democracy in Cuba is not very healthy. So, like, I think there's probably some validity to, like, protesting against, like, the authoritarian streak in the Cuban government. That being said, the reason people are protesting isn't because of the socialism, isn't because of the lack of capitalism, isn't because of any of that. It's because they don't have food, because 10% of their economy was just vaporized as people are dying on the streets from a pandemic. Yeah, there are like, I mean, I wouldn't recommend it, but, like, Cuba's literally within swimming distance of the United States. And not being mentioned in these stories are the counter-protests. The counter-protests to these anti-government demonstrations, these pro-government demonstrations. And also, it's interesting how many of these stories aren't putting the pieces together for people. Like this one, the headline here is, "They're starving us to death, but they have the money to build hotels." Yeah, because the hotels were 10% of the income of the entire country. But now they're gone, so that's why the food is unaffordable. Is this an all Cuban protests or actually CIA stream? No. No, they aren't. It is not. All I'm saying is, the people who are angry at the Cuban government are angry because they don't have food, not because they hate socialism. And they're angry about the authoritarianism in the Cuban government. Both of these things are valid causes to protest for. But let's not pretend that the cause isn't directly related to the massive embargo of Cuba or to the evaporation of one of their core industries. They just hate they don't hate their socialist government, they hate their authoritarian government. Joebot, Master Duck Slimes Normies has been here enough to know that we're not tankies. And of course, Joe Biden just says, listen to your people, Cuba. Which, hey, maybe if we're concerned about the people of Cuba, we should end the embargo. the longest running embargo of modern history.